Welcome into another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, I've got my 5 takeaways series. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's jump into the first one. So, remember, these are 2025 takeaways. So, the first one, Ladd McConkey is elite, but he's the only relevant skill position player on the Chargers. We saw what happened to the Chargers in this game. When the chips were down, they lost 32-12 to the Texans despite being favored. Ladd McConkey was great. 9 catches, 197 yards, touchdown on 14 targets. He was amazing. And I do think it does not matter what else the Chargers do. I do not care. I'm not fading Ladd McConkey. He is, this has been an elite start to the career for Ladd McConkey. Problem is, they have nothing else. Nothing else at all. Will Dissly, he had his time this year. He was okay. 2 catches, 16 yards on 5 targets. Dissly's more of a capable backup, I think, than a starter. Quentin Johnston, he was great last week, and then this week a goose egg on 5 targets. I'm not going to say he doesn't belong in the NFL. I think that's hyperbole. But realistically, Johnston should be the outside wide receiver 2 on this roster. Wide receiver 3 overall behind McConkey and some sort of other outside wide receiver. He can't be the second weapon on a championship contender, a really good playoff team. He's not good enough. So as the wide receiver 3 on the team, I think it works. For fantasy, we don't care about Quentin Johnston. We're not going to care about him. J.K. Dobbins slowed down over the end of the year. 9 carries, 26 yards. Nothing as a pass catcher. Had some injuries. Again, he looked really good at the start of the year. End of the year, not so much. He may or may not be back, but he can't be back in this role. It cannot be Dobbins and then the corpse of Gus Edwards, Kimani Vidal, Hassan Haskins. That will not work. So they're going to have to make changes in the running back room. Now, for me, I'm still in on buying Justin Herbert. People always overrate these island games for Dynasty. They say, well, it happened in this one game that everyone watched. So it's going to happen in every game. That's obviously not the case. This year for fantasy, Herbert was pretty good. 65.9% completion, 7.7 yards per attempt, 23 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 69 carries, 306 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And that was with his current weapons. McConkey is going to be even better next year. They're going to be upgrades at running back, wide receiver 2, and tight end, most likely. I'm not going to fade Justin Herbert just because this game didn't go well. People will do it, but I'm not going to do it. Remember, fantasy and real life also are not always linked. The Chargers don't have to win the Super Bowl for Justin Herbert to be a good fantasy quarterback. So I saw this one by Herbert and Quentin Johnston for Bryce Young, Zach Charbonnet, and Devon Vele in Superflex. Give me Herbert. And then in Superflex, by Herbert for Bucky Irving and Jacoby Myers. I love Bucky Irving, but in Superflex, this is Justin Herbert easily. This is not a close trade. So look at the Justin Herbert market. He might be a good Superflex dynasty buy right now. Next up, Brian Robinson fading away, fading fast. He's looked ordinary over the stretch run of the season. Now, the Commanders won this game 23-20. It was a close game. You would think Brian Robinson would be very involved, have a lot of work. That didn't really happen. Robinson had 10 carries for 16 yards, 4 catches for 22 yards, 51% snap share. This was actually his most receiving work since week 1, also against the Bucks. He hadn't had 4 catches in any game all year. So this was a good receiving day. Rushing was putrid, didn't score. So this is not good enough. Austin Eckler, 8 carries for 27 yards, 3 catches for 26 yards, and a 47% snap share. They split work evenly. Eckler had the concussion, but he came back, went right back to the even work split. I don't know. He was more efficient than Robinson in this game. It's kind of a low bar, but I'm nervous. I'm nervous about this backfield, which is why I might look to sell Brian Robinson. For me, we've moved away from the touchdown luck that was carrying Robinson, and it's been downhill lately. So for the year in 14 games, 187 carries, 799 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4.3 yards a carry, 20 catches, 159 yards. Just averaging 13.4 carries and 1.4 catches a game. So not even 15 touches a game. Now that's fine, but you need a lot of touchdowns to be a top 20 running back on that volume. And it's been bad lately. In 4 of the last 5 games, Robinson, 3.1 yards a carry or fewer, but it's longer than that. He missed those 2 games in weeks 9 and 10. He's had some real stinkers. 4 out of the 8 games since that injury, 25 rushing yards or lower. Last touchdown was in week 13. I worry about this. Is this really a player you want to assign high dynasty value to? Not so sure about that. And, there could be some changes here. I mean, Robinson is a holdover from an old regime. He turns 26 in March, entering the last year of his rookie deal. He's a fine player. But do you think it's out of the question the Commanders look to the future at running back? Eckler's in the last year of his contract in 2025. He's pretty low cap hit, played pretty well. He'll probably be back. But is Brian Robinson a high-value dynasty asset? I don't think so. I think we've seen what Brian Robinson is, and I worry about players like that. They can be replaced at any time for any reason. And if Robinson wants a 10, 12 million a year contract extension, that's not happening. So I saw this one in the Dynasty Day Trade Finder. Brian Robinson in 208 for 26 first. I think I just take the 26 first, move on. And Brian Robinson for Ricky Pearsall. Again, if I'm thinking of an asset I want to hold, I think Ricky Pearsall has more dynasty value than Brian Robinson. So this would be the kind of deal I would make. Now, speaking of running backs who are not inspiring, neither Najee Harris nor Jaylen Warren will be 2025 starting running backs. The Steelers have so many problems, which were exemplified in the 28-14 loss to the Ravens. I feel like I've discussed their quarterbacks and George Pickens to death, but the running back room not helping them. Harris, 6 carries, 17 yards, 3 catches for 41 yards, 46% snap share. It's been more of the same for Harris again. The 4th year of more of the same. A boring plotter. The Steelers declined his 5th-year option. He's a free agent. I think he's gone. His attitude in the locker room seemed to lead me to believe that he's not going to be back here. They didn't want to even pay $6 million on a 5th-year option. Why would they pay him in free agency for that amount or more? But I do think wherever Harris goes, it's going to be more of the same. Splitting work, not much pass game work. We're not going to be using Harris as a weekly fantasy starter. Not on a good dynasty team anyway. And then Warren, I don't know. I mean, 2 carries for 6 yards, 4 catches for 19 yards. He was out there 54% of snaps, but Warren has just vanished from too many games this year. We have not seen the massive receiving role that he had in 2023. Far less efficient than previous years, despite a similar carry workload. He's a restricted free agent. He'll probably be back, but we see that Warren is not a workhorse. Even on the lower role, he wasn't super efficient. We're not getting Harris leaves and Warren is getting 15 carries a game and 4 catches a game. We're not getting that. That's not happening. So, yeah, I'm not super excited about Warren either. Now, what do? For me, you hold these 2 guys for now and then wait for this window to come. Right now, who's interested after this game? Who's interested in buying Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren? Probably nobody. But I think a window is going to open because the Steelers, to me, it's very clear. They're going to retain Warren via the restricted free agency route. Restricted free agents almost always go back to their original team. They can use a 2nd-round tender on Warren. No one's going to pay a 2nd-round pick for the honor of signing Warren to a contract. Cost them a little over $5 million. I do think they keep Warren to have some continuity. Najee Harris, I think, is gone. So what's going to happen? They're going to keep Warren. Harris is going to sign that contract. You're going to have a moment. Warren is the only running back on the team. Yes, he will get all the work. No, he won't. But someone will say that. Then someone will also say, oh, Harris signed this big contract. Yes, I want him. I don't want these players. I don't want these players at all. Now is not the time to sell them, but you will have that window, I guarantee you, and get rid of these players before you see it, before the NFL draft happens. We don't want to see it with these players. It's not going to be good. So I would get rid of these players at that immediate moment in free agency. But for now, just hold them until now. But yeah, look for a path to remove these players from your roster. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. Right now, I'm offering a 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. You get my rankings, access to Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month, $3 with discount, and include all of that. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. Probably going to film another one, I'd say next week. So I'll be able to redetail everything that I'm offering. I'm doing a team breakdown series of every NFL team. I've already done 3 of those. I got 29 more to go. So that's on there, along with QA, any dynasty trade advice, all of that. It will not take place in the YouTube comments. I think I've been very clear about that. I don't really feel a need to repeat it again, but it's not going to take place in the YouTube comments. That will be for patrons only. So if you want my Dynasty trade advice, Dynasty startup advice, my Dynasty rookie rankings, those will be for patrons only. And that is going to be my plan for the offseason. With that said, let me get into my next takeaway. So my next takeaway is that Khalil Shakir is the best of an unimpressive Bills receiving core. So let me differentiate this from the Chargers group. It's not like Chargers, which had Ladd McConkey, who's amazing, and then other players really totally irrelevant. The Bills have more relevant players, but I'm nervous. I'm nervous that we're overrating the entire group because Josh Allen is propping them up. Is there's this mysterious upside that we're chasing that might never come. Allen had won 20 of 26 for 272 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was amazing. He averaged 10.5 yards per attempt. But despite this, we saw very little from the supposed valuable dynasty weapons. Curtis Samuel had the most yards. And Samuel and Ty Johnson caught the 2 touchdowns. So pretty much everyone that has high dynasty value was left out in the cold. Khalil Shakir, 6 catches, 61 yards on 6 targets on a 53% snap share. To me, Shakir is safe. We know what he is. The Bills will never move him out of the slot. He'll never play a full snap share. He never broke an 80% snap share all year. When he's on the field, he'll see a good complement of targets. He's one of those slot-only wide receivers that's not going to change. It's like your Josh Downs, your Jaden Reed. We see players like this. I do think he's a little bit below those players in terms of talent, and we only think he's better. Maybe some people think he's better because he's playing with Josh Allen. But with that being said, we know what Shakir is. That's not the one really to talk about. The ones to talk about are the other ones. Dalton Kincaid, 3 catches, 47 yards on 3 targets, 38% snap share. So hard to trust a tight end who leaves the field so often. Has not broken a 50% snap share since returning from his injury. Type of usage caps his upside. He's really just not an every down player, and it's hard at tight end when you're not an every down player. Keon Coleman, it's a red alert here. I mean, 1 catch for 5 yards on 3 targets. He just hasn't done that much as a target earner in his rookie season. I'm nervous. He hasn't even earned a role over Mac Hollins. Mac Hollins outsnapped him and outproduced him in this game. I'm nervous. Very, very nervous about Keon Coleman. Amari Cooper, a little bit of a different story with Cooper. 2 catches, 8 yards on 3 targets. 5th in wide receiver snaps behind even Curtis Samuel. The Cooper in-season trade experiment has failed. He was more fantasy relevant in Cleveland with Deshaun Watson than he's been in Buffalo. He averaged more receptions, more yards per game in Cleveland. So this has been a failure. Cooper's not going to be a Bill next year with how he's been used. There's no reason to sign him to what he's going to cost if you're barely going to use him. That is totally nonsensical usage of Amari Cooper in this type of situation. So what do we do about it? Well, I think of the weapons, Coleman's the one who's the most danger. We know Shakir's kind of locked into his role. The Bills are not replacing Dalton Kincaid. They have Knox's 2025 deal. They're locked into that. It's going to stay the same. But can the Bills really look at what happened in 2024 and in these 2025 playoffs with Mac Hollins playing all the time, Amari Cooper not working out really, Curtis Samuel's free agent contract hasn't worked out, and they're stuck with that contract next year? Are they really going to say, let's do that all over again, especially if they don't win the Super Bowl? I would not be shocked in the slightest if the Bills use their first-round pick on a wide receiver, sign someone unexpected in free agency, or work to trade for a wide receiver. Even if they don't, I don't think we've seen anything from Keon Coleman to say he's magically going to become the outside wide receiver one we want next year. In 13 games, 29 catches, 556 yards, 4 touchdowns, 57 targets, 2.2 catches, and 42.8 yards a game. Big plays are nice. The volume's not there. Not even at 5 targets a game. 15.5% target share and 18.5% target rate. Those don't impress me at all. So if you can get off Keon Coleman for 205 and Jaylen Warren, obviously I don't love Warren, but is this worth the 15th pick in a Superflex league? I'd probably rather have the 15th pick over Coleman. So Warren is just a throw in. And then there was this one, so Keon Coleman for 109. I'm not a big fan of this 2025 class, but I like it more than this. I would take the 109 here easily. Now, last takeaway. AJ Brown is an elite NFL wide receiver, but not an elite fantasy wide receiver. And people always get on me when I say things like this, but this is just the reality, is that real life and fantasy football are not the same game. And we have to accept that. It's something we have to accept. Brown completely vanished from the Eagles' win over the Packers. And it's not even his fault. Jalen Hurts went 13 of 21 for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Eagles ran the ball 34 times compared to 21 pass attempts. And, the pass attempts didn't go Brown's way. Devonta Smith, 4 catches, 55 yards, and 4 targets. Dallas Goedert had that really nice touchdown, 4 catches, 47 yards, touchdown on 6 targets. Brown, 1 catch, 10 yards on 3 targets. Again, is it Brown's fault? No. Did Brown become bad? No. But there are too many games like this. There are just too many games like this where the passing offense is not necessary, doesn't fire, or both. And it's concerning. So for me, I think we have to accept that 2023 A.J. Brown was an outlier. Brown averaged between 4.8 and 5.2 receptions every year over the last 5, except 2023, where he had 6.2. And 2023 is even better because if you leave off week 18, where he played just a few minutes and then was subbed out because they were resting starters, he'd be at 6.6 catches a game in 2023. But we didn't get 2023 this year. We didn't get it this year. We didn't get it in his previous career. That was an outlier. This year, 67 catches, 1,079 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5.2 catches, and 83 yards a game, 16.7 PPR points a game, just 7.5 targets a game, 12th in fantasy points per game. Again, I'm not saying that A.J. Brown isn't a great wide receiver. He is. Or even a great fantasy wide receiver. He is. But he's not a top-tier fantasy wide receiver. And since he'll be 28 when we're next scoring fantasy points, he's certainly not a top-tier dynasty wide receiver. I can tell you that. So if we look at the trades for A.J. Brown, he's not valued correctly. He's just not. So in a super flex, if you could sell A.J. Brown and Matthew Stafford for Jalen Hurts, a quarterback, a high-end quarterback, I would absolutely do that without a second thought. And then this next one, sell A.J. Brown in 204 for Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas had the same PPR points per game as A.J. Brown in his rookie year, 5 years younger. They're not close in value. I'd much rather have Brian Thomas. So for me, this is easily on the Brian Thomas side. And these were not even the worst deals for A.J. Brown. So A.J. Brown, to me, is a player I would look to move off of this offseason. Now, we've got a bit of NFL news, so we'll get into that. Patriots hired Mike Vrabel as their head coach. Seemed obvious for weeks. Vrabel, good hire. But if he chooses Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, I'm going to be a bit nervous. It's not going to cause me to fade Drake May or anything, though. So this happened, and it is what it is. Cowboys parted ways with Mike McCarthy. Chose not to renew his contract. It's a fine decision. But they waited so long that they kind of missed out on the interview process for a lot of top candidates. I don't know. I'm a little worried about what's going on with the Cowboys. I'm worried they're going to hire some retread coach. I've heard some weird names. I hope they get it right, but counting on Jerry Jones to get it right is not something I'm relying on. So, it is what it is. McCarthy was not a great coach, but I'm not sure that the replacement's going to be better. I'll just say that. Now, got a couple of Patreon questions, then we'll wrap things up. So part of the reason I didn't cover the Steelers quarterbacks was because I knew this question was coming. Steelers quarterback situation. So honestly, I don't know what they're going to do. It's very clear that they're not going anywhere with Russell Wilson as quarterback, especially on a more expensive contract than the minimum. So I do think they bring Russ back as a bridge, and they look at drafting some sort of developmental quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft. Whether that's, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart. Those are the 3, I guess. I don't know. But they're going to draft probably somebody. I think they let Justin Fields walk. I think Fields signs with a different team to compete for starting job or behind kind of a meh starter. The Colts are a very common link for Justin Fields that I've heard a lot. Or something like the Jets or maybe the Giants for Justin Fields. Regardless, I think Justin Fields walks. So Russell Wilson comes back, Justin Fields walks, and I think they add another quarterback in the NFL draft. That's my most likely outcome for the Steelers. And then speaking of the Steelers, did your opinion on George Pickens change at all? No, not at all. Pickens is so clearly not an NFL wide receiver 1. I will bet against him being the target leader for the 2025 Steelers. Wide receiver is the Steelers' biggest roster need for 2025. Roman Wilson, nothing. Mike Williams, nothing. These players did not deliver. I think they're going to need to bring, and they have Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson was what they had. I think they need to bring in 2 major wide receivers of consequence to fill out the starting lineup. And so my opinion on George Pickens has not changed. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. If you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty content year round. 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. You can click on the link up there, patreon.com/fantasy advice to sign up. And you also get rookie content. It'll be exclusively on the Patreon for at least the next couple of months. Every sign up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.